talk.com. We're having fun. Hope you're enjoying this. I surely am, with Marc Stevens, MarcStevens.net. He has a book that you can get there on his website called Adventures in Legal Land. Marc Stevens, you're working on a new one. What's that about?
Well, Adventures in Legal Land didn't go into a lot of depth as to the immorality of government and why it should be abolished as soon as society has evolved to a point that it can accept the responsibility. And so I go into a lot more depth as to the actual nature and the psychological and economic damage that is done when, by allowing this to continue, by having this structure of society. And I do have, and this one is expressly for self-help also, where there is a section, the second half of the book, of dealing with bureaucrats and giving examples of how to respond. And and there's going to be a cross-reference, which it may actually not be in the book, because I have a cross-reference now online, but it's going to include the crossovers for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and England, because I've had people replicate success in those areas also.
Well, we have a lot of listeners around the world, so it'd be a nice thing. I get this feeling, I've talked about on my show, Marc Stevens, that deep down, souls know that they're being taken advantage of, and it's just hard on them psychologically and physically, even if it's subconsciously. They just know that it's not good for people to be forcing them to do something. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are so sick and scared.
Well, yeah, and this is one of the things I go through in the new book, so I don't want to go in too much depth. I think deep down, at places you don't want to,
you don't want to go, right?
Like you don't talk about at parties. People know, and I've said before, I think the great human tragedy is that we all know what government is and should be abolished, that all human interaction should be voluntary. But we sort of think we're an island, and that, we assume that because our neighbors and friends and family are not talking to us about it, that they don't believe that. And it's that fear of not being accepted that makes people not discuss it with friends and family, and even more so, not to act on what they know is true. We know that it is immoral, and you can have people of religious faith profess that, yes, it's immoral to steal. Yet why do you continue paying taxes and participating in it? You're participating in something that is grossly immoral. And you don't even have to get into what these people are doing with it by dropping bombs and whatnot in 10,000 miles away. The fact that taxation is the taking of property by force, it is theft, it is immoral, it doesn't matter what they're doing with the money, it's just that. But we're not standing up and being adults, growing up, and standing up for ourselves and saying, you know what, come hell or high water, this is wrong. If there was a law that said I had to marry my sister, I wouldn't do it. For some reason, this line is drawn that everyone, and we all have it. I'll get on and I'll openly profess on my show and on your show, and I don't pay income taxes. I don't file the returns. I don't pay. And if you are in Arizona, I don't collect, and you order my services and my book, I don't charge a sales tax. I don't collect that for anybody. But too many people will not take that step. We're participating in our own enslavement. It's like Etienne de la Beauté said 500 years ago, 400 years ago, and he's French. The tyrant only has two hands. He's only got two eyes and two ears. How does he enslave us if it's not with our help?
Yeah. Was there not a big victory for the tax? What would a fair way to describe the tax movement or the not paying tax? How do you say that? What would be the correct way to say that? In other words, the movement of people like yourself that are suggesting that the whole tax thing is a fraud. Is there a term you have for that? Tax awareness, or
We just call it voluntarism or agorism. We believe that the initiation of force, well, we're normal people like you, and everybody understands that taking property by force is wrong. I mean, when you're 5 years old, you get that. Yeah. I mean, a kindergartner gets that. We understand that. We know it's wrong. We just are more consistent with that belief. We're not saying we're totally consistent, but we're more consistent with that. And we'd like everyone else to do that. So or agorism, where we do...
Agorism, what does that mean?
Well, agora is from the Greek, and it means an open market. We believe that we can bring about a voluntary society by providing better services at a better rate. I mean, I actually wrote that in the book, but I wasn't familiar with the term agorism at the time. Was
there not a huge victory in the courts not long ago? Was it Beecraft?
I believe that Joe Bannister had he had another acquittal, and a number of people, Tommy Cryer and Lloyd Long, who I mentioned in the recent article that on my website now, I mentioned them, that they were acquitted. Yeah, they are. That's significant that they were able to convince the jury. Even though I disagree with the position that they took, I would not have done it that way. I always go at it from a factual standpoint. But that's not going to stop them. You've got to get acquittal after acquittal. I mean, you have to have mass acquittals before they start to realize we can't convict people. But
Well, could they not? If awareness got so grand, Mark Stevens, just change the law and make it legal?
Well, that's the thing. That's like I mentioned to you earlier. It doesn't matter what the law says. They could pass a law that says Mark Stevens and Patrick got to pay 50% of their income or their wages.
Right.
It doesn't matter because it comes down to application. I don't care what the law says until you can provide me with a competent witness and admissible evidence that it even applies in the first place.
Oh, that it even applies to me, you mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. So what they'll say, if they tell me that, Mark, your client's a taxpayer on a federal law, so really? And the law school that you graduated from, it was an accredited school, right? And so, well, no, I'm not a lawyer. Oh, but you are an expert in the interpretation and application of the tax code? And like, well, no, really? So on what basis do you... it comes down to... And if they continued, Patrick, trying to insist that they were experts, then I could just keep questioning them, and it'll become apparent that they're not. And I have them all recorded, and it's on my website and videos too, that they're not experts, and that they're not. I have agents admitting they're not qualified to say my client's a taxpayer, and it comes down to application. I can ask a simple question, say, "Look, are you an expert in the interpretation and application of the Constitution?" And I say, "Well, yeah. Oh, okay." And so, factually, what is the Constitution now? What? And then when you be, I'm telling you. They won't even be able to tell you, Patrick.
A lot of our shows here, Mark Stevens, on our network is about health and nutrition. We've been doing that for 30 years. And there's quite a bit of activity these days, as you know, with wanting to inhibit people's freedom, to buy stuff. With Codex Alimentarius and over in Europe, now the FDA is... they've been breaking into people's places and actually telling them they can't sell raw milk.
Right.
We have here in Texas, you have to have a club to buy raw milk, and then they won't you have to go to the farmer to buy it. They can't even bring it to you. It's just, it's kind of crazy. What kind of things can those of us who want to be able to have access to food, what kind of things can we learn to help us retain that right that we have to eat what we want to eat?
Well, a good example is you have to support the people who are providing the food. You can't do this thing where if they are getting letters or if there's an attack initiated, you can't run and hide. You have to stand by them. I mean, I helped someone in Austin, and I have on my website my closing argument because I represented somebody against the health department in Austin.
Oh, really?
And I'm going to put the whole thing online, but it is 3 hours long. It's a very difficult listen to, except for my parts. And I questioned this this health agent. And what they were trying to do was they wanted to sanction a family farm that in rural Austin, and they said that they did not have permission to sell turkey and poultry and eggs and whatnot to the community. And I had the agent on.
How long ago was this?
This is in September.
Oh, really?
So it hasn't actually resolved yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the agent on the stand.
Which agent? Was it an FDA?
No, this was the Texas
Department of Health. Yeah, and they didn't want the people to sell poultry and eggs to the community.
Right.
On what grounds?
Well, they didn't have permission.
They didn't have permission.
They didn't have permission.
I hate that word.
Oh, so I get I have the agent on the stand.
I don't like that word.
I don't. Yeah. Well, yeah. I know. Free people. Yeah. Permission. So I have the agent on the stand, who, funny enough, his name was Lord.
Oh, yeah.
Agent Lord. And yeah, that was funny. So I get him. I have him on the stand, and under oath, he admits he can't prove the family or the farm. He has no evidence that they're within Texas, the state of Texas.
You mean he can't prove that they reside, or not reside, but they're domiciled in Texas?
He cannot prove presence within the state of Texas. I know. You got to hear this too.
Well, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, but if you question him on it, and you're very competent and or a professional, and you're very calm, you will get these admissions. I know it sounds surreal, but I have the audio that I will put up to prove it. But right now, all I have is my closing argument, which I didn't expect to make, so it's totally off the cuff. But I also was able to get them to stop the cross-examination when I started asking them about the facts that he used to connect my client to the regulations.
Oh, yeah, like what authority do you have to tell these people they can't sell turkey or whatever?
I wasn't really focusing on that. Okay. I knew they had authority as far as to tell him what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because they use guns, so it's not an issue that they don't have the authority.
The authority with guns.
Yeah, well, we know that. Well, Mark, we have authority to make an assessment. Yeah, that's true, but is it supposed to be based on facts, or can it be arbitrary? Yeah, so don't argue the authority. So I was focused more on the facts that he used to determine the law was applicable, because we already determined that the law didn't apply outside the state of Texas. And we already established by the agent's own testimony he couldn't prove that they were in the state of Texas. So we already knew he can't prove that the law and the regulation applied. So game, set, match. But they stopped the cross-examination. So when I was asking for the facts, the agent said, you're making an argument, and that's proper for closing. I said, no, I'm asking a question. And that's what they do. They will characterize your question as an argument, which is ridiculous.
Because once you start taking a position to make an argument, you're cooked.
Well, they'll just deny it.
They'll just deny it.
And they'll get the judge to agree. But if you're just asking questions, so what I said in my closing argument, this is something I think is very, very important for people to understand. I told them this all boils down to the fact that a group of people called the government can't do what this beloved family farm can do, and that is provide a service to the community on a purely voluntary basis. I said, you guys should be ashamed of yourself. There's no evidence of wrongdoing. You have no evidence that there's been a complaint from a consumer or a vendor. And I said, that's what it boils down to. They provide a service to the community on a voluntary basis, and you have to force yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. No, I said, nobody wants you. How do we know nobody wants you? This bureaucracy, no one voluntarily pays you. How do we know that they love the family farm? Because they've been doing business for years on a voluntary basis. They don't force themselves on the community. So I think that's the long-winded example to give you. People need to stick together. They need to support one another. If you want raw milk, and I think that's your business, people should be able to have a voluntary transaction there, then you have to stand up for each other. You have to start building these communities. And that's what I use my radio show as a way of